to keep the trains running. Hi, everyone.
Yeah.
Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Greetings.
Greetings.
Hey, Stephen. How are things down there in Florida?
Not yet. Still in New York.
Still in New York. All right.
Soon.
Hey, Rita.
This is Marion. This is Marion. I'm calling in from Mars.
How's the atmosphere up there?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Yeah.
All right.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Rita.
Yeah.
How's it going, everyone?
Things are okay with yours truly. I'm doing fine. Mom is doing great at 99 and a half.
Wow.
Things are going all right. Everyone else?
Hello, everybody. It's
How are you?
Daria.
How are you?
Hi, Daria.
Hi.
Just a quick note, Alan, Beverly might be a little late. She just asked me to let you know to let her in from the waiting room.
Of course. I have the waiting room up. Hey, Juan.
Hello, Juan. Hello. Everyone.
Well, it's good to see everyone. I guess we can start. It's 7 o'clock. Shall we give another? There's Joel. Is he on another phone? Tracy?
Yes, he's on another phone. He's in the back of the apartment. I'm in the living room.
All right.
Otherwise, if we were in the same room, it interferes with the. We have to separate.
Well, this is a lecture where, there doesn't seem to be a lot of cosmology and spiritual kind of stuff. This is very psychological, and this is a lecture in which the guide kind of really takes us to task, right?
Yep.
He kind of says, like, hey, get with it. Now it's showtime. Because this, of course, is a subtext of so many of the guide's lectures, the meaning of the ego and its transcendence. All right. Hi, Deborah. Greetings. Welcome. So, this lecture, I see it in 6 parts. First, there's an introduction where the guide basically presents the basic issue, which is that the ego believes that it is the whole self. The ego believes that any diminution of itself, of its functionality, is an attack that it has to defend against. And the ego is reluctant to give up any control. He says, you identify with your brain, your outer intelligence, your will, your mind, all those faculties immediately available, not realizing that to whatever degree you now possess these, it was you who in the past made them available for yourself through a deliberate effort. Now, of course, the guide is talking here about all the progress that we've made throughout many incarnations. And that's something that I think maybe the ego, even that idea, it might be the case that even that idea the ego fights against. Because to accept this long process of development through many incarnations in itself is to say that the ego can't control everything and that the ego is not really in charge and that there's a deeper process, a longer process that's really taking place. So, because, the minute you accept this concept that we evolve throughout, the guide says, thousands of incarnations, all of a sudden you take the pressure off. And that's the way I see it. All of a sudden you don't have to do everything in this life, not to mention not to disregard the idea that what we have to do in this life is very important and urgent. At the same time, there's another awareness, which is that there is so much time and so much space for learning and growth over these thousands of lifetimes. Anyway, after the introduction where the guide presents the ego and how it sees itself, then the guide talks about the tricks, and this is what the main lecture is all about, the tricks the ego plays to stay in control and deny the reality of the greater self. And those tricks are all encapsulated in the famous Pathwork triad of pride, self-will, and fear, which the guide then goes into. Then there's a small paragraph about confronting death. Then there's a long section about self-discipline. Then there's a section about healthy movement. And at the very end, the guide talks about insanity, which is very interesting and I think kind of reflects what we talked about in our last lecture at the very end. If you remember, where the guide, there was a little epilogue where Eva herself actually talked about a member of the Pathwork who had struggled with his own mental illness. And here again, the guide himself this time talks about insanity. So there's one paragraph I'd like to mention. Oh, first, before I say that, I want to say that the guide talks about the ego in a very negative way in most of the lecture. But then on page 6, the guide kind of says, hey, wait a second. When I speak of ego, I do not wish to imply that it should be totally negated, denied, and insulted. Insulted, that's interesting, right? The ego is part of divine consciousness and holds all aspects of the greater self from which it has separated itself. Even if they are distorted and misused. The basic energy and consciousness of the ego is made of the same substance with which you ultimately reunite. So here the guide is talking about the healthy ego, the fact that the ego has the ability to make its positive and beneficial choices. So I want to read a paragraph on page 4, which is, I think, something to really feel into. And I'll read it to you guys. This is how it goes. Isolation and separateness are, without a doubt and without exception, tragic and ironic. Tragic because unnecessary, and ironic because the ego clings to what it hates and what hurts it the most. It lacks the discipline and the perseverance, the commitment and the faith to venture beyond its present scope of awareness. Suffering must exist as long as you cling to this state and indulge in it. As long as all the tricks of the ego are acted out, rationalized, denied, perpetuated, and nurtured, as is usually the case, you cannot help but suffer. Well, isolation and separateness are certainly tragic and ironic and very powerful. I think that we all feel them to greater or lesser degrees, right? And to get beyond it, to say, well, I don't want to feel those things anymore. The only way to get beyond, I think, isolation and separateness is when you undertake the path of self-development, self-exploration, you start to realize and learn how your attitudes and how, as you open yourself up more, you feel better. This is what I keep calling, what the guy says is justified faith, which is when you proceed in these directions, the benefits of it become self-evident. And in the section of self-discipline, you know, what the guide says is basically very straightforward, you know, that you've got to do the hard work and conquer the resistance. And he likens it to any sort of activity that you might want to get good at, like learning how to play a musical instrument or learning any kind of a job. There's a certain amount of just tough slogging it out that you have to do before you can let the spirit move you. It's interesting because I was reading a book by Bernard Shaw the other day, which is a really cool book called The Intelligent Woman's Guide to Communism, Socialism, and Capitalism, published 100 years ago. And he talks about freedom and leisure and who has freedom and who has leisure. And he says that when you're free, freedom is not the ability to do nothing. Freedom is not doing nothing. Freedom is taking the time you have and using it in a productive and constructive way. So it reminded me what the guide says here on page 4. You often hold the misplaced and confused idea that self-discipline hampers your freedom. And conversely, that a free person does not need self-discipline. Nothing could be further from the truth. Freedom in its real sense is unthinkable without discipline. And conversely, the people who indulge themselves and who reject discipline are inevitably dependent, weak, powerless, and consequently afraid they lack freedom. Freedom can be gained only to the degree one uses voluntary self-discipline, uses it for one's own sake and not to appease and appear good in the eyes of others. The latter attitude often leads either to actual or imaginary discipline being imposed on the person by others. So that is my quick summary of the lecture. And there's so much really here that one can reflect on. And I want to open the floor to your thoughts as we go through it. I kind of confronted myself here reading this about the tricks. The guide, I think he outlines about like 15 different tricks that the ego plays in order to avoid grappling with the task of uncovering the real self, right? And that's pretty heavy. I mean, these are very, very clever tricks and they really work. Anyway, your thoughts, my friends, what do you think? Oh, and I want to welcome Drebra Sterling, who emailed us recently, and greetings, welcome to our discussion group. And I hope you can share your thoughts too, as we discuss this lecture.
Very happy to be here.
Okay.
Very happy to be here. And, hoping to hear what you'll have to say. Very blessed to be here. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I need to?
Yeah, go ahead, Deborah. Yeah. Well, I can't hear you. You're muted, I think. Maybe it's your headphones. I heard you for a minute there. Can't hear you, right? Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Go
I
ahead.
took them off. Hi. Sorry. My name is Drebra, and I'm blessed to be here. I live in upstate New York, little town in Rosendale in the Hudson Valley. And I do miss the city. Lived there for a long time. And I landed here because I just been searching, my entire life, and all these things that I have been picking up throughout my life, they all came to kind of collect here. So this is my second lecture Zoom meeting, and I'm looking forward to many, many more, and I'm
Great.
eager to learn. Absolutely.
All right. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Joel, I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts about this lecture. Am I putting you on the spot?
Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Yeah, you need to unmute yourself.
There you go. Wow, Alan, it's interesting. I probably devoted more time to this lecture than I have to any other lecture, and reading and rereading, and I don't even know how many times I've read it over. And there's just so much material it's to do. You mentioned that you counted up 15 different tricks that the ego plays, to keep us from moving forward, or keep us from living in the truth. And seeing all of those put together in this one place is overwhelming, to say the least. I mean, it pointed out a few that that the ego has managed to keep from my awareness up until I was reading it. So as I was saying to Tracy earlier, for me, it's a matter of kind of breaking down some of the key paragraphs and trying to focus in on those points. I know one of the things that struck me was talking about I think the word is indolence, right? Where we're kind of lazy and unmotivated and maybe lethargic, to kind of dull, and how this is an aspect of the ego or the lower self to keep us from really engaging and being alive. And so I think it's a fine line, especially now with all that's going on. I noticed that in a way it's a defense mechanism for myself to just kind of withdraw, to be tired from all the all the emotions that are coming up with from the change that we're living in with the virus, and just all the loss and deprivation that's you read what's happening in society to so many people, lost their jobs, they're at risk of losing their homes, the hunger's increased, and and all the political stuff. It's a lot to process, right? And so trying to stay sharp and put everything in perspective is challenging. And so I noticed that one of my responses is to just kind of be tired, and so it was helpful that brought that to my attention to try to be more proactive when I'm just sitting around doing nothing. Get up, do something, engage. So that was very helpful, and I'd have to refer back. It's just so dense. There's just so much. You can go to any, and it was interesting to hear your observations. As many times as I read it, I didn't pick up on the whole part about the insanity at the end of the lecture, and I'll have to look back and read that over. So certainly, if we're looking to get a handle on our lower self as we're moving forward with the Pathwork, this is a great reference point, that if we're kind of struggling and we don't know what is the underlying aspect of the lower self that we're not seeing, this will certainly help point us in the direction. So I very much enjoyed reading this, and it's a lot. It's very dense, even though it's not really that long in comparison to some of the other lectures.
Yeah, this whole issue of indolence and the difference between relaxation and giving up. These are all interrelated ideas. And, there is this concept called excedia that the Catholic Church says is one of the deadly sins. Also, it's called sloth. And sloth. And sloth really is not just lying around, but it's basically not taking life by the horns, not coming to grips with life. And I think the guide, of course, talks about that, about the desire to just stay where you are. The ego just wants to not change. It's afraid. The ego fears losing its present state, meaning its self-awareness, so much that the fear displaces the instinct of self-preservation.
Oh, that's a powerful line.
And it's interesting when kind of an ultimate state of just giving up is insanity, I think, as the guide says. I mean, it's hard not to relate to the idea that you guys just can't take it anymore. The ego just can't take it anymore. The ego is like rattling around in this self-created box. and it's at some point it just says, I can't deal with it. So insanity then is the way out, as the guide says at the very end. Either fantasies or just self-destructive behavior, where you just can't continue the way you are, and you're not willing to try to make the effort to turn in the way of the path of self-facing. Now, what do you think, Juan, as maybe the most self-disciplined person, as far as I'm concerned? How did you react to that?
Yeah, hello everybody. Well, Alan, you know, the truth is that, my God, is this lecture, you know, I mean, to me, the way I see it is it contains, I think, you know, the plight of us human and this sphere. This is the reason, the way I see it, of why we incarnate here. And it's so much information here, and so much light, so much to grasp, and the way I see it, so enlightening. It's almost like every line that you read here is, you know, it just throws at you like an enormous amount of information that is just incredible. And to me, on page 1, I see one line there that really stuck with me, and well, so much of it, like I said, in general. But this line, where it says on the 1, 2, 3, 4, and the 4th paragraph of page 1, where the guy says, humanity believes that this split of ego consciousness is the real self. And you know, to me, that's big, because that's it. That's it. I think that's, you know, that's the main problem that we have, or that I have. I should speak for myself only. And really, if it was 1, 2 words, I try to think of 2 words to describe the ego, that will kind of encompasses it. And and the guy mentions these words there throughout the lectures quite a few times, when he say finiteness and separateness. This is really what the ego have grown to be, and it's really what is keeping us in this state of suffering and misery and unhappiness that we find ourselves as human being here, because we have grown to believe, we have grown to believe that we are this limited self that we are, meaning this earthly sphere, their physical body, the things that we do here, even though we may not consciously acknowledge or accept this, this is, you know, deep down in there, this is what we believe, or this is what I believe anyway. And I find myself, because one of the big problems that I have, and more I discovered that in myself, my biggest problem, I think, is fear. I really struggle with fear, and the many aspects that, you know, basically all that derives from that. Well, actually, I think the triad, as the guide explained, you know, self-will, pride, and fear. But I think one cannot go alone. It's like the fear is mixed with self-will, then pride, and pride is mixed with, you know, with self-will and fear, and they all like separately they exist, but they also mix together. But in my case, I find that, you know, that fear is a big one, and it comes out that way because I see myself believing that I am this physical body. And then my main fear, of course, comes from fearing of death. You know, fearing death is like, oh my God, you know. And then, of course, everything else, because then I'm careful, you know, that I have to be careful what I do, or how, like, again, like the guy explains here, this fear of the ego to venture into the unknown, because this fear that is going to be annihilated if it does goes beyond this area where it feels comfortable and where it feels in control, or where it thinks it has control. And then all the suffering comes from that, because I think that, like, I had to remain in this compartment and and adopting myself and exercising all these measures that I think or what I feel is going to keep me in this safe place where I feel that I am comfortable and where I feel that I do have control. And then all the suffering comes from that, just from trying to remain, from trying to force myself, because like the guy says, in this lecture also, the divine self is effortless, but the ego is forceful, is effortful. You need this effort, you need this constriction, to keep that control that you think is so necessary in order for you to stay alive. Because again, I believe that this is me, this is it. Once this body is finished, then that's the end of me. Even though intellectually, I believe that, I know that, there's the higher self and there is something beyond this realm. I know, I have heard from many authorities and gurus and spiritual guides and you name it. But still, subconsciously, I feel that I still believe deep inside that I am this physical body, and and everything that is attached to it. And that's who I am. That's my environment. And when if anything threatens it, then I am like scared to death. It's like, oh my God. Then that's it. I'll cease to exist.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Well,
so much to it.
I mean, the ego, it's a long process, right? To dissolve it, like as if it were a giant iceberg that can only be slowly warmed over time and dissolved over time. When I had my session with the guide back in 1974, the guide talked about why I came to this life and the purpose of my task and this and that, and also my psychological issues and my main problem, which is my idealized self-image, right? And the guide said it's always important for you to have the big picture as well as the psychological, because if you don't have the big picture of your desire to incarnate, to solve particular issues, and the consciousness of many lives, and the consciousness of taking a place in this great scheme, as the guide calls it, the plan of salvation. If you don't have that, somehow it's difficult. You need that to bring yourself out of the ego, because that is not an ego awareness. That feeling of contributing to this great venture is not something that the ego cares about.
Can I throw something in?
Yeah.
And I think that we want to remember our divine self, right? That we're told that we're a split off piece of the infinite source of creation. The guide explains, and in the different lectures, particularly Alan, I think your sharing of the meditations, right, is one key aspect of how we connect with our infinite self, right? Where we kind of lose the chatter of the mind quiets down, and we come into experience of our oneness, right? And our connection with each other, which is especially powerful when we're meditating together, right? The synchronicity of that experience. And so I think that the mind and the ego wants to deny the existence, our existence as infinite beings of light and love. But we have these experiences that remind us and that bring us into connection with our higher self. And so that's another trick of the ego, is to get us entrapped in these thoughts that all of that doesn't exist when we're living in reality, as it were, when we're not paused or somehow in connection with our higher self. So that's one of our tasks, right? Is to keep reminding ourselves and coming back in touch.
I wonder if, the guide says under the category of fear belong all worries, anxieties, and apprehensions. The ego's trick is to make change appear threatening and life annihilating. Worrying and anxiety also prevent you from attaining joyousness, peace, and freedom, the cosmic reality that opens up when the present state is expanded. yeah, so expansion, the ego resists expansion. And it's unfortunate, you know, that here we are dealing with all the inertia that we have. Like my blood pressure spiked recently, and like I was really worried. Uh-oh, you know, I'm not getting any younger. And my instinct was to like do nothing and just be not exercise, which of course is the wrong thing to do. But isn't that a good metaphor? Like if you don't exercise, it gets worse. But you don't exercise because you don't want anything to change. This is why people don't go and see the doctor, right? Because like if you just deny, if you just pretend nothing's going on, then nothing will change and you're going to be fine. But that's not expanding, right? Stephen, your thoughts?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yeah.
It was a good lecture for me, primarily because I found it readable. And not every lecture I find readable. And it was fairly short, actually. I kind of coupled it with another lecture. Was it 179, Chain Reactions and the Dynamics, something?
That's the last one. Yes, yes.
I think the two go well together, actually, somehow in my mind. And, you know, fear is a very powerful motivator and inhibitor. And in my life, the lecture, frankly, these lectures don't tell me anything new. They just uncover what I already knew and don't want to look at. And certainly, you know, the experience of fear is there. But then I realized there are different levels of fear. Um, a large part of my life was being um, traveling professionally and exposing myself to in countries that people were at that time, Colombia and so on, would get kidnapped. And being an American for a multi-billion-dollar company, you're sort of walking around with a bullseye on your shirt. And that, of course, you know, there was fear. I mean, to say there wasn't, but yet I did it. And I found it actually invigorating. And I found it cathartic. And I felt alive and felt wonderful in many ways. So I felt protected too, because there were people around me that were protecting me. And it was very lucrative, as an aside, which was very nice. And that was fear, and there was fear, but it didn't stop me. It wasn't a block. I continued for 20 some odd years flying every week to these places and living too in those places. But there is a fear in my life which does stop me, and it's a fear of emotional pain. And I try to avoid that. And I think very early in my life, I decided if I could just stay alone and push people away and not get involved and not find love, but just stay by myself emotionally and to a large degree physically, I could eliminate the fear of losing them. And as the Buddha said, we all age, get sick, and die, and you will lose the people you love. And that's true. I see it in my own family. And it hasn't happened to me, and I always think I'm so good because I walk between the raindrops. Well, I'm not really walking between the raindrops because nobody in my life that I cared about really died, because I don't really care that much about people, even in my own family. Painful to say. But it's kept me, in a way, inoculated, you might say, from feeling that deep pain of maybe losing somebody, which for me is more fearful than anything else. I'd rather lose myself, my own life, than lose somebody close to me. Therefore, I never allowed anybody to really get close to me. And my I guess, thought very early on in life was, maybe I have 30 trillion cells, I don't know. And any one of them can get cancer. Well, that's not very nice. But if I love somebody, now I have 60 trillion cells. Doubled my chance for cancer. And I felt if I could only extricate myself from any kind of relationship other than the relationships that I need for sexual gratification, for companionship, and so on, obviously the basics, I'd be better off. And that has had a very detrimental effect. what I thought would happen really didn't happen. What really did happen was I found myself alone, lonely. And as I aged, lonelier and more alone. Even though I'm in a relationship now, a woman in Florida that's waiting for me. But I can't seem to open myself up to truly love her or be close to her. So it's a double-edged sword, and I think this actually brought it out. And the ego is very smart, and I see how my ego, anyway, is very smart, and it plays tricks on me. But it's not really a trick because I see it, and you know what? I don't really care that much. I allow it to do it. And the trick is, it's a wonderful little trick that everybody has something wrong with them, no matter who they are. If they don't call me, why didn't they call me? They rejected me. If they do call me, wow, that's really annoying. Why is he calling me? It's really bothering me. And if I can't figure out that something's wrong with them, I'll look at them and maybe their teeth are bad and I'll focus on that, or they're wearing some really crappy looking shirt, okay? Stupid things, really, but it'll keep me apart. And the big thing is they talk too much, they don't listen, they're really not that bright. On and on and on. I'll find a myriad of things to consider and reject them without really knowing them. And I see that now, and it's so clear. And the lecture actually clarified it. It was like sort of blurred, but after reading it, I went to the park near me on 41st Street, Bryant Park, I guess it is. I just sat there for like an hour thinking about this. And I realized, yeah, I kept people away from me. And the sad part is, I don't even know who these people are that I kept away from me. I created these images in my own head. And the truth is, I don't even know who they are. I can only sense at the deepest level that a number of them really love me and opened their hearts, their bed, and their house to me. And I took that and it made it into a convoluted mess where I said, oh, sweetheart, I really do love you, but I have to go. I have a job to do, and the flight's leaving in 2 days. I can't hang out. And as I left, I thought, got away from that one. But I really didn't get away, because in the end, it caught up to me. And that's it. Is there a happy ending? I don't know. It
Maybe
hasn't all ended yet.
Maybe not this life. That's very deep.
And excuse me, and I like what you said. Maybe not in this life. So you know what? If I don't become the Buddha or Jesus or whomever or an Alan in this life, then maybe, hey, there's a life further down the road. And you know what? If there isn't, am I going to know the difference anyway? But I'd like to think that there is.
Well, what you said about the fact of the other 30 trillion cells and that they could also get cancer, that struck me as a very beautiful and compassionate, empathetic thing to say. That is a very lovely metaphor.
Because it would break my heart to be close to a person and see them suffer. And I'd rather not be there. Thank you.
Thank you. We're all filled with images of invulnerability, like Jason Bourne and James Bond and all these guys. That's the ego pretending that it's perfect, I suppose, right? And they say the American hero is not the guy that gets the girl, but the guy that could have the girl doesn't want her. Like Clint Eastwood, right? Remind me of that a little bit. Tarya, how are you doing?
It's kind I'm okay right now. I just wanted to thank Stephen for opening his heart and letting us know how he is as a person. I'm sure I have had the same kind of issues myself, where I have kept apart from people not not wanting anything to get close to me, really. And I mean, this was Frank's death was the second death. The first one, my first husband, I lost up maybe over 20 years ago. So I can only say that it's somewhat easier now. It's you can't really get away from that pain and suffering that comes from it, but it somehow changes. The pain changes when the time goes by too, and you see things differently. So I think I have, I don't know, I mean, I have been doing pathwork for so long. I don't know, maybe over 10 years, 12 years, something like that. And things change very slowly for me, basically because I have a lot of resistance, and also I have a lot of fear. And little by little, I see myself changing as far as other people do. I'm becoming more willing to let them come to my life, just as far as talking to people, not isolating so much, which is still one of my main things. I love to isolate and spend time by myself, exactly for the reason that nobody can hurt me when I'm here. But I don't know, it just seems that it's a road that takes many years to go anywhere if you get somewhere. And like we always hear, you know, if you cannot accomplish whatever you wanted to in these lifetimes, there will be many more. And I think that my next life will be somewhat better, because I think that I'm getting over something now in my attitudes towards people, my fears about loving relationships and love and all that stuff that has taken me so many years to learn. So that's my take on that. Thank you.
I think it's very good to have a long perspective on things. At least keeping the awareness of that perspective. Right? I mean, the guide is always talking to us about not identifying with the aspect, the negativity, the ego, but identifying it. And I guess when you zoom out a little bit, when you contemplate many lifetimes, and when you also, it's interesting how these things the guide talks about being part of the ego, your outer intelligence, your will, your mind. It's not the emotions, right? I mean, the emotions don't seem to really be, the emotions are set off and are used by the ego to prevent you from expanding, but the emotions themselves don't really seem bound to the ego. According to what the guide says. I mean, I'm an intellectual type, I guess. The ego, the emotions are threatening, but also they're relaxing, right? Both of those things.
Alan, could I just say something?
Sure.
Is it okay?
Yeah, of course. Go ahead.
Were you gonna pause? Okay, Taria, I just wanted to comment on something that you said, which was that you're observing yourself, and Stephen as well. And the guide reminds us that the observer self is the higher self. It is the divine self. And so when we are in the observation framework, we are connected to the source. And so even though we're having the experience, right, the experience of separation or isolation or disappointment that we find comfort in this persona, that as we observe it, then we are connected to the higher self, and that as we continue to observe, once we become aware, right, that the knots begin to unravel. even though sometimes they're painfully slow.
Beverly, what are your thoughts? I can feel you thinking about these things.
Okay. Well, I'm afraid I don't have anything really original or to say. I mean, I've had similar thoughts from what a lot of people have said, that this lecture was chock full and overwhelming. And as I was listening to it, they were like piling on, and then the ego does this, and then the ego does this. And I'm just like, oh my God. So I feel like I need to go back and listen to it or read it really slowly and kind of process it a little bit more, because it was very overwhelming. But I was also struck by what Stephen and Taya was saying, kind of about that need and fear connected to people, like need to be close, but fear of being close. So you just kind of somehow avoid it all. And then what Joel was saying about being aware of it, that's kind of the experience I had when I was listening to the lecture. Just recognition of, oh yeah, I do that. Oh yeah, I do that. Oh God, that's that too. Oh yeah, I do that too. So it's just like a lot, a lot to process, a lot to go back and kind of look at and see what other new insights will come as I process more and more.
I think after reading this lecture now, I'm going to make a list of all the tricks, like a handy list. And I'm going to send it out to everyone. I think that would be very valuable, right? To kind of get a bullet point list of these tricks, which are overwhelming. I mean, it's just so much that the ego does.
Yes.
You know, we're denying pleasure, resisting pleasure, holding on tightly, just not believing in limitations that aren't really there, using any negativity that another person has against them to justify ignoring them. I mean, I guess you said something about that, Stephen, didn't you? Negative traits you could pick up in other people and use that as a reason to discard them or disregard them. But of course, the guide says on page 7, you can succeed only by using the healthy part of the ego to shed light on the sick part, to use the honest part of the ego to shed light on the dishonest part. And then this is such an important thing, this concept of justified faith. The guide says, then ego transcendence takes place in the safest possible way. Then you acquire new territory, a territory that was at first frighteningly foreign, unknown, and apparently dark, but will become familiar and light. With this new safety, I love this sentence, with this new safety, a sense of eternality is created in the self. That says so much, right? A sense of eternality is created as you open up these new territories by expanding your awareness and doing the work of self-facing. It's also interesting, the guide later talks about how some aspects are kind of purified and connected and others are not. Like in some areas of life, the guide frequently says this, that things seem to go really smoothly and well. In other areas, they don't. And by trying to bring those aspects that are difficult, troublesome into the light, and kind of burning through the effort that it takes to create those expansions, we develop and grow. Does anyone have thoughts about aspects of their life where things are moving very easily and smoothly and the ego doesn't seem to be involved, in other aspects where it's the opposite?
So Alan, I wanted to
Hi, Teresa.
Here. I wanted to say this because this is such a strange thing with me. So I am a Raja Yogi, and I have aspect in me that when I sit down and I have a deep meditation, especially group meditation, but also sometimes on my own, I am completely happy and free and flowing, and like in that aspect of myself when I'm joyful and expanded. But the trick is, again, and now this lecture was genius for me because it slapped me in the face when I was listening to it. that I block myself from regular practice. Oh, I'm too tired. Oh, I had such a hard day at work. Oh, you know what? I'm not feeling well. I went through COVID. I really need more rest. Oh, you know what? I meditated in the morning. I can skip it now. I'll just shower and go to bed. Oh, let me watch this show. So I have this where I'm actually flowing and really high in the expanded state. It's there, but my problem is I cannot get to it so easily because I gotta go around my ego and my defenses. And now I see these tricks. It was just like, oh my God. It was like screaming at me, like, you do this, you do this. And the part about discipline, I am fairly undisciplined and I go on emotions. So when I have a good day, when I have a good company, when things are going well, sure, I'll meditate, I'll pray, I'll do all of this. But as soon as things are not going so well, they go is like, oh, you see, God doesn't really love you. Look at what he's doing to you. And now you want to sit down and meditate? So when I need it the most, I get the most resistance. So I'm just noticing this, the laziness and all those excuses. It would be helpful to get that list, I guess. And with relationship, it's such an incredible thing what Stephen was saying and Daria, because I'm just the opposite. I always hope like, oh, my next relationship is going to be so deep, so blissful. It's going to last forever. Those people are amazing. You know, I put them on a pedestal. I'm like, oh my God, look at what I found. And then I get to know them, and you know, there's very, very few who actually prove to me that they are the real thing. And you have to look at some of people and say, well, yeah, it hurts. You know, they're not really there, and am I really benefiting by knowing them? I'm just the opposite. I thrive being out there. I don't like seclusion. I'm a very social being. I love people, but I tend to put them up on pedestal and really idealize them. And people are people, you know, they'll hurt you, they'll disappoint you, they'll do whatever. So I have the opposite problem. Gain a distance and a perspective early on without throwing their faults at them, but just like really intuitively knowing, is this relationship really good for me? Do I really need to let them in so close? You know, so maybe just the opposite, like, oh, I love people, I adore people. People are like God sparks. People are amazing. Look at these people. And then I'm like, oh, you know, didn't expect that coming from them. I just love them. I eat them up with a spoon. And then when they hurt me, I'm so deeply hurt and so disappointed. I'm like, how did that ever happen? Why didn't I see this coming? But there is still people that I love and adore who are proving to be, and it doesn't mean that they're ideal. They have their faults, they have their problems, but they're actually real and they love me. So with those kinds of people, you know, it's worth it. It's worth it all. And it's just worth it because that gives you the biggest joy.
Yeah, well, we all have our defenses, right? And different ways of coping with different ways of dealing with the problem of other people. I've often thought to myself, you know, how difficult it is to get beyond your own eyelids. And I've often kind of wondered, how much of other people do I really see? How much can I really take in? Am I taking in, you know, 1% of another person or 5%? How much of it is just myself being mirrored back? Right. Well, Nancy,
Yeah,
go ahead, go ahead.
that too. We attract according to our vibration.
Nancy, what are your thoughts? Got to unmute yourself. There you are. Go ahead. Can I talk? You got to be louder.
Nancy, the sound isn't working. No.
Better.
Yeah, you can hear her? I can't hear you, Nancy. Now it's coming better. Okay.
Well,
It's still very faint.
Okay. Well, I was awfully glad when I got to page 4, when the guy says, well, my friends, I've really told you, and I'm sure all of you can identify with this, um, you can easily recognize yourself, because the first time I read this, it really freaked me out. I said, oh my God, I have all those tricks. I do all of those tricks. I do them in spades. And so that was really good. And it's been good to hear other people saying how intense all those tricks were and how ubiquitous they are for all of us, especially those of you who have spoken. So now let's see. I guess that's it. Although there was something else I wanted to say, but maybe it'll come later.
All right.
Oh, I know that I really, the aloneness of my ego. I mean, I just feel very isolated deep down. So that was really nice to have that talked about here, and how the ego really wants that.
Yes. But maybe that tends toward insanity, that real isolation.
Yes. The royal road to insanity is isolation. Freud said something like that.
I mean, like in The Shining, where they're in that resort on the mountain somewhere, and there just isn't anyone else. Yeah, and so Jack Nicholson goes insane. Yeah, kind of like that.
Well, I'm up here in New Hampshire, and there's really no one else around other than my husband and a couple of people that I see occasionally, but it's pretty isolated. Luckily, we do a lot of Zooming.
Well, today there's so much isolation because of the virus, right?
Yeah.
Sort of it makes you think, right? He says isolation and separateness are, without a doubt and without exception, tragic and ironic. Tragic because unnecessary. I don't know. It sort of seems necessary these days with the virus, but there are other ways to not be isolated, right? There aren't there.
Can I ask Nancy a question? Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Nancy, I'm just curious, and if I'm asking something too personal, please feel free not to answer. But the lectures, as Tracy explained to me some years back, that basically we have isolation or we have connection, right? And I think we all have these tendencies towards, or most of us have these tendencies towards isolation. And so, how were you? What would you attribute your ability to form and maintain a lasting relationship to? Would you mind commenting on that? So you have this tendency to isolate, but yet you're in a relationship, you're married, and you're there together. And so what steps did you take to resist this tendency to isolate, in order to build and form and maintain a relationship?
Well, I guess part of it is I always expected I'd get married. That was an expectation I had. And I dated like crazy in the 70s. And then finally found Tom, and it stuck. And I really want to keep the relationship going. We lead in many ways, we lead separate lives. We do things separately, although we're both very involved in the First Unitarian Church in Brooklyn. But we give each other a lot of space, so I can get the connection and the separation and isolation.
Thank you.
Rita, any thoughts?
Hi, Alan. Hi, everyone. How's it
Rita,
going?
good to see you.
So I was just, I just commented to Alan privately, isn't there one or more lectures on each of these ego tricks? Because some of these words sound familiar from other lectures, and I have not read every single one. I know Tracy said she read every single one multiple times, and I have yet to read all of them even once. So there are certain ones I've read many times, and even in this group, I've had the pleasure of learning about certain other ones. But there are keywords in here that I see again and again, and one of them is closeness. So closeness.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lecture, a whole lecture called Human Predicament of Desire for and Fear of Closeness.
Right.
So what I'm listening very with humbleness to Stephen and Taria, to what you're sharing, and I think that I'm more tricky about it, like probably the same, but more tricky about it. So I'm more outgoing, but that doesn't mean that that's the golden ring, being the outgoing and being the one to be I'm not afraid, let's have a serious relationship. It doesn't mean that the world is going to go that way. as I have learned. So that, and then the guide talks about there's a lecture for everything. Doesn't matter whatever it is, there's a lecture about it. So then there's the forcing current. Then there's the no current, and then the yes current. And there's so many ways to be sneaky, because I could say I have a yes current, but I slyly pick somebody who has a no current. So I could say I've got a yes current, so I'm being free and easy. How come? Well, I picked somebody who has a no current. Well, that's not going to work, is it? So then it just goes on and on. So just because I was emotionally open doesn't obligate anybody else to be. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that so on some level, Alan, maybe you can illuminate this. So the guide is talking about ways that the ego, in a tricky way, keeps us from the unified state.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he says that.
So,
right, like this first trick he talks about on page 3, to make change appear threatening and life annihilating.
mm-hmm.
That's straightforward, right? In other words, it's just change. That's all it is. It's change.
Mm-hmm.
But the ego, it could kill you, or it could annihilate you. And that's a obviously, everybody knows that's a misconception, right? Everybody gets that. It's just that the ego doesn't get it. A part of you doesn't get it, right? So I guess the purpose of that is to meditate on, well, how do I believe change in what areas of my life? Maybe that's it. Do I believe change is threatening and life annihilating? You know, if I would go and ask for a raise or something, would that annihilate me? That's a change. Get another job. You know, find a relationship that's different. Eat something different than I eat every day. I mean, anything can be frightening, right? But change is, as they always say, right? The only thing that's certain in life is change, right? So we all know that.
That's for sure.
But the
Um,
ego doesn't get it. The ego is like a really dumb, you know, just a dumb, dense, obtuse person that doesn't want to get it, right? And you have to keep on saying, "Hey, wait a second, change doesn't have to isn't annihilation." And guess what? If you denying pleasure and bliss is a little more complicated, I think, right?
It's just dumb enough to get over on us all the time, Alan. That's all.
Yeah.
We're so smart.
It is. I'm definitely going to make this list of the tricks because there are a lot of them. The ego denies the joyousness of true being by making something more of other people's behavior than necessary. Don't you like that?
That sentence really jumped out at me.
Right?
I'm so glad that you said that because I was going to say that very thing next.
That's like drama. Yeah. The ego denies the joyousness of true being by making something more of other people's behavior than necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Drama, like you used to listen to my ex-wife, right? I mean, it's like just because somebody has a kind of behavior pattern, you don't have to make a whole big drama about it, right? Yeah. That's a good sentence there. I like that a lot.
I like that one a lot.
That happens all the time, right? I mean, and that what does it do? It cuts off the vision of real life that exceeds the limited present state. You just get locked into it. You make a big deal about somebody else's behavior and you're just back and forth like the ping pong ball, right? Boom, boom, boom. You can't expand out of that perception. But the problem is, the isolated ego-bound entity experiences the terror of finiteness. That's scary, right? Because the ego is afraid of its finiteness, right? The ego knows that it's got such a limited view of life that it's really terrifying, and then seeks solace in other distractions. Okay.
I want to say something about change. I think the other side of change is that we want to stay where we are. It isn't only that which we are afraid of change, we get very scared of it. But I think, I'm not doing it right now, but I'm sure something will come out as I'm speaking that I am doing it. But it's like wanting to be secure, wanting to be safe, and feeling really good, and holding on to that. And you can't. And that's where change does come in, of course. You can't hold on to that. So I'm just looking at the other side of the coin, that it's a fear of change, yes. But I don't know, for other people, it's the comfort of being someplace with that familiar. It's the unfamiliar. It really isn't change for me. I think it is that I'm afraid of the unfamiliar. So, and I'm facing it, and I'm looking at it, especially since here with COVID, and have to be facing myself a lot. But anyway, so I think that for me is important, because I wasn't relating to the change. I'm afraid of change. I think I like to stay where I am, and I'm holding on to that. So I just wanted to add that in.
I'd like to say something, this concept of unfamiliar. I don't know what's unfamiliar, because I think it was Einstein that said you can't solve a problem at the level it was created.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm creating a problem, and am I trying to solve it at that level? It's impossible. It's like trying to pick myself up by my shoelaces. My point being, all my life, I've been wearing glasses. And to me, the glasses are, hey, don't get involved. Hey, that's dangerous. Hey, do your own thing. Be smart, etc., etc. Now, suddenly you find, or I find, that's not working. Well, how do I solve that dilemma at that level? I need something to enter into my life. Maybe it's God, maybe it's grace, maybe it's the higher self. I don't know, to say, hey, come with a different viewpoint. Because I don't see how I can really solve it at that level, the everyday level that I tend to live with. I have to take those glasses off and say, wow, hey, my whole life I've been wearing these glasses and really screwed my life up. I see it now in a very different way, but how do I know, A, I have the glasses on, I'm beginning to know, partly through Pathwork, let's say, our discussions. And now how do I know really how to remove them? Being mindful, looking, being aware, asking myself things, seeing what comes into my heart. I guess that's another way. But I have to teach myself these things. But without that, the true intent and to open myself up to another way of looking at it, I'm pretty much doomed just to keep those glasses on and say, hey, that person's not nice. Hey, I'm not going to get involved with this one. Hey, yeah, I feel lonely, but the world's screwed up. I'm better off just doing my own thing.
Yeah, but Stephen, the mind is telling you this. You don't have to believe that mind. You know, it will be telling you because you are like on the autopilot, just like it tells me, oh, don't meditate. Oh, you need more rest. Oh, you had COVID. Oh, you're weak. And I'm like, you know what? Screw you. I'm still going to sit and meditate. And I take pleasure now in doing opposite to what my mind tells me. It tells me, don't do one-hop breathing. I'm going to be like, well, I'm going to sit down and do the breathing right now. It tells me, don't meditate. I said, you know what? I'm going to sit down. I don't care if I'm falling asleep. I'm going to meditate. Because the mind is lying to you, and why do you have to listen to it? You know, it's not in charge. You're in charge. So you can say, well, you know what? You've been saying it all along, and it's bullshit. I don't believe it, and I'm going to do just the opposite. You don't have to listen to everything your mind is telling you, because most of them are what the mind telling you. It's ego-based and it's a lie.
Well, I keep thinking it's important to remember that all of the good qualities that we have, as the guide says, they were won by a tremendous amount of investment on our parts. In other words, every powerful emotion, every strength we have, I think this is what the guide is saying, we built up through lifetimes of effort. You know, we come here now with a lot of divine attributes which have been created by our hard work in other lives over millennia. It's a good thing to think about that. You kind of, just as they say that great men are always standing on the shoulders of other great men, like in science, you know, we stand on our own shoulders of what we have done, what we have created for ourselves, and the fact that we are functional in so many ways is because of the hard work we've done. So we can't lose sight of that fact that we're resting on a foundation of a lot of work that we've done, spiritual work, over many lives. That's what I think. And I think that the guide says that. It's good to reflect on that. Tracy, what are your thoughts? And why'd you pick this lecture?
Okay, I had to unmute myself. Why did I pick this lecture? I think I was fascinated by the different array of tricks that the ego uses to keep itself differentiated and separated from its higher self. I'd not been aware that the list was so extensive, but like everybody else, I also had the experience when I was reading them going, yep, I've done that. Yes, I do that. Yep, that's one of my favorite ones, and so on and so forth. And then I had to read it 3 or 4 times, even in preparation for the lecture. I finally just kind of sat back and said, what is the guide really telling us? Because it is a dense lecture and it is a difficult lecture. And I sort of summed it up in my own mind as, at this moment in time, we all have assumed different form identities. Some of us are men and some of us are women and some of us are older and younger and we have different occupations. And we identify ourselves, as Juan was saying, with those specific and temporary form manifestations that we've taken our consciousness, the universal consciousness of which we are a part, we are, for this particular incarnation, for the purpose of, well, I always think of there's two purposes, which one is to progress your own, and they're intertwined, obviously. One is to progress your own spiritual path, and the other is to spread the spiritual divine consciousness. Obviously, the more you yourself are purified and connected to it, the more you have to share of that particular divine consciousness and spread it in many different ways. But the fear that I was captivated by Juan's description of the fear of the annihilation of the form, and I had that too, or I really had that before I started on this particular path that I'm on now. I think I lived my entire life in fear of the annihilation of this particular form identity that I now have. And I realized during COVID that I had really been wrong in my assessment of my level of fear, because I've never been afraid of the virus. And I realized that that's a very outlying kind of position to be in, that most people that I know are at some level or another afraid of the virus. And I started to really think about that and said, well, you can't be that afraid to die if you're not afraid of the virus. And just this morning I was in the gym and I had a thought, something along being afraid to die. And then I heard my higher self say, no, you're not. And it was the first kind of time I really heard that higher self say that to me. And I realized that it was true at that moment anyway. I'm sure if I went to the doctor tomorrow and they told me I was going to die, or one of my 30 trillion cells had gotten cancer, I would be afraid. But the disassociation from the form that I currently manifest has been pronounced in the last year. And yet I still have all of those tricks that the guide enumerated in this lecture. And I really related also to Stephen's sharing about keeping himself separate, because if you keep yourself separate from people, then they can't hurt you. I lived my whole life that way. And like Nancy, I was able to sustain a long-term marriage. And that is sort of, an interest. I was glad Joel asked that question, because it was kind of an interesting thought, is that how have I done that? Joel and I've been married, I think, 43 years now. How have I done that with this underlying fear of being close to somebody else? And I don't have the answer to that now. I have to really meditate on that. But so I guess I chose to circle back and answer your question. I think I chose the lecture because it was so elucidating for me to see these 15 tricks sort of laid out in one lecture as opposed to scattered through several lectures, and to realize that I had every single one of them.
Humbling, isn't it, really? Yeah, and
Very.
I'm thinking about, like Catherine Karras, who was the head of the foundation, the Pathwork Foundation, until about 3 years ago. She just said that she had cancer. She has, looks fairly serious too. And, you think, well, do you still have the fear after pursuing a spiritual path like this for decades? and I invited her to share her thoughts and her feelings to this Pathwork circle, email circle that we have. And I asked my mom about it. My mom is 99, and she's kind of at peace with death. She doesn't seem afraid. But I guess what I was trying to say is that you can't really tell somebody else not to be afraid with any authority unless you've somehow conquered that or resolved that yourself. Right? I mean, otherwise it's just a platitude unless you've personally gone there and you speak with an inner knowledge. Marion, are you with us?
Oh yes, I'm here. I'm listening. It really is really enlightening. Everybody's sharing. Thank you so much, everyone. And I really appreciate in this lecture, this specifics, because I've got them all. You know, it looks at self-will, you name it, you know, stubbornness, resistance, spite, all the really luscious ones. And also fear. I think fear ruled my life a lot. And fear of the expanded state. Creative emptiness lecture always comes up to me. You know, that fear of letting go of the old and opening up to what's I've not created into yet. I just want to go back and watch TV. So I do resonate with everything in this lecture. And that comes up a lot is about, and I appreciate what, you know, Joel, Tarja, and others have said about the observer, because those things, they don't bother me so much anymore because of my relationship with, as what the guide said, we have a personal God, not a person, but a personal God and God as principle. So my personal God is my very, very best friend within, and the only one who will never let me down. So when all that comes up, I'm judging others, or I don't like what somebody's wearing, or I don't know, all these things come up around self-will, pride, and fear. The immediate reporting in. And I've gotten more used to the energy, like not bemoaning it. Like, hey, report that in. Turn it over. You know, that's your job for my higher power. And so it leaves me a little freer to poke around to see with those distortions what real needs I am trying to fulfill, because everything is divine in me. And so whatever distortions I have of the ego, whatever, they are an aspect of my divine self. So I can use it as a gateway, all of those. I don't use the word sick. I don't have any sickness. I have maybe some distortions or veils. I have veils, but I don't have any sickness. So I don't agree with every word the guide uses. And so anyway, I really appreciate everyone sharing, because I feel the community aspect of it, of traveling together. And about death, I'm older, I'm heading toward my death, as everyone from the moment of birth does that. And so I chose my date of death some years ago. I participate in Death Cafe. So I chose my date of death, and everybody laughed and was wondering about that. So it kind of liberated me. I put it in an envelope, because somebody said, well, how do we know when you die, that's the date you chose? I said, well, I'll put it in an envelope and leave it behind. You see if I hit the target or not. But it kind of liberated me to work backwards. So what do I want to accomplish before that date? So it's sort of, you know, I feel kind of liberated about that. And the message I get, because I always try to put things in order, get more perfectionistic, you know, my apartment, this or that. But being creative, for me, it's writing. When I'm writing, I'm not in any distortion. When I'm hugging a tree, I'm not in any kind of past, present, future. And so it's like, okay, Marion, lighten up, hug a tree, dancing, and cry when the pain arises, because as the guide said, when pain and pleasure are simultaneous, it's the entry to the unitive state. So it's, you know, using a lot of tools. So thank you all very much, because I think the tools I have in my toolbox that if I don't do them one day, I don't beat myself up about it. So that's other things that I do fail at. I tend to beat myself up, but then report it in. So that's it. So thank you all very, very much for your sharing. It really adds to my wealth. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Thank you, Marion.
Could I ask Marion a question?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Marion.
Yes.
You were talking about, and I want to thank you, Marion. You've always been very open with sharing about your personal struggles, and you spoke about your friend and your personal relationship with the divine, and so. Could you just say a little bit more about how you were able to bridge this gap, this huge gap of being, injured, suffering soul, struggling to find your way in your life, and yet now you have this certainty of the presence of the divine within yourself, to whom you turn for answers and sustenance. Could you share a little bit about that?
Well, there's a level, and the guy talks about the ego, where there is, the bubble, when we had the Big Bang and we all separated, the fall, it's all in the lectures. The ego is what's wrapped around to create me, the bubble. I call myself Bubble Marion sometimes. So when and so when I walk down the street, there's something called a provisional ego where I am God, and where I just repeat it going down the street. I'm reaching for my teacup, I'm touching the tree. I am God. And then there's Bubble Marion, who is judging people. So it's kind of fun, because what I don't know is there is a veil of what brought me to this place, except from a deep longing and pain, was an awakening. That does not come from the ego or the will. That comes from allowing and from the not knowing of exactly what my, journey is. And so from that awakening comes knowing, because belief is belief, knowing is knowing. So I think, because at times I fall off the wagon. I did one day, I had the expectations. That word expectation is powerful, because a teacher told me years ago, all expectations lead to pain and disappointment. And I said, well, can I have one? Not even one expectation? Well, it'll lead to pain and disappointment. And it sure is. And so I think having some of that, like we get in the lectures, a lot of the, because it was from that inner knowing that I came to the Pathwork. It was from an altered state experience that I came to the Pathwork. It wasn't, and so that from that inner relationship I have. So it was the need for that personal God relationship that that guide, teaches us, came from knowing that I needed a guided master, like in the path we use, Christ, in Jesus Christ. And in some lecture, the guide said, and there are others. I don't remember what lecture that is. So if the focus is on Jesus and the Christ, and the guide said, and there are others. So my other showed up, and of course I accept Jesus and the Christ. I accept all of this. So that came as a concept of I cannot traverse the inner planes without a hand. No one can. No one can. And so it was revealed to me. I didn't do anything. It came from a longing, and it was revealed to me through that white light experience. So nobody can take that from me. Now I fall off the wagon. I fall in the ditch every day. I'm in there with like doubts, fears, pain, disappointment. But bottom line, nobody can take that away from me. Nobody or nothing. That's it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Marion. Yeah, you reminded me of what the guide says here on the fourth paragraph, the end of the graph. He says, the process of self-enlargement, of making apparently foreign territory your own domain, constitutes the pathwork - any valid pathwork. Interesting, right?
Anything what?
Any valid path.
What was the last sentence you said?
Because the process of self-enlargement, of making apparently foreign territory your own domain, we talked about this in terms of aspects of yourself that are difficult or not purified. Then he says, that constitutes the pathwork dash any valid pathwork. Which sort of
Okay, yes,
implies that
yes,
there
yes.
are different pathworks, you know, and like the Course in Miracles is so much like the pathwork. Unitarian Church is like the pathwork. There are many things like the pathwork.
Exactly.
We are all, and you know, there's such a multiplicity of people and approaches, right? That's another big paradox, right? The guy talks about that everyone has a specific, unique divine quality that no one else has, like the proverbial snowflakes, no two alike, or leaves. Let's just think about.
Yeah, I just want to comment a little bit
Yeah.
here and kind of clarify a little bit, Alan, I mean, and everybody, on the paragraph that you read earlier, Alan, on page 7, which is the second one, where the guy said, when I speak of ego, I do not wish to imply that it should be totally negated, denied, and insulted. The ego is part of divine consciousness and holds all aspects of the greater self from which it has separated itself, even if they are distorted and misused. The basic energy and consciousness of the ego is made of the same substance with which you ultimately were. So my thing is, it seems that the ego actually, I mean, we're talking about the ego. I mean, there's so much to it. I mean, the ego, the unhealthy ego, that is it's a terrible thing, really. But what I seem to understand, and correct me if I am wrong, it seems that the ego separated itself from the divine consciousness when we fell during the fall, right? And then it seems, because it appeared that the ego, with the either or concept and beliefs that really keep us so much trapped into this illusion, exist only on this earthly sphere. So it seems that it separated itself from the divine consciousness back then when we fell, when we disunited from the divine, being, when we are in a state of bliss and happiness, and we were basically an angelic state, and then we fell from there. So it seems that when the ego separated itself from the divine consciousness, and then the way I understand it, it seems that then kind of revive itself, or kind of back into the scene when we are born on this earthly sphere. Doesn't it seem so? I mean, the guy, I don't think specifically explains it that way, but I think that's what it is, right? Isn't it?
Well, I think that it might be easier to look at these two. The guy talks about the little ego and the healthy ego. The little ego being basically what's discussed in this lecture, the little ego being the limited self, the self that enforces and wants limitation. The healthy ego being the decision-making part that can motivate us to pursue a spiritual search, but can't transcend itself. The healthy ego being the part of ourselves that, as I always say, can bring us like to the door of the church or the temple, but can't open the door. It can take us to where we need to be, but it can't go through. It can't. The transformation has to come from a different part of ourselves.
Yeah, that's definitely the healthy ego. And another aspect that seems very obvious here and kind of confusing to me is that that as the guy explains in this lecture, the ego require effort and self-discipline, while the divine self is harmonious and effortless. And to me, in my own experience, what have happened is that, because as the guy explains so many times over and over again, and not only the guy here, but spiritually, any spiritual master will tell you that in spirituality, nothing can be forced, right? So we need to make this effort, but the problem seems to be with me that when you act harshly and want to use the same ego to make this, effort like this, like kind of like against the current, like really force yourself to exercise a certain discipline or effort, then that's kind of defeat the purpose there. It seems that even the effort itself needs to be harmonious, right? It needs to feel that it needs to be kind of aligned, right?
Well, I think what you might be overlooking is the idea that the resistance has a significance. If you don't want to start that process of effort and discipline and you're resisting it, the question is why? There is a reason. There are images, misconceptions you have about what effort means, let's say. So it isn't just that the part of yourself has to get off the dime and just impel yourself to move, but there's another part of yourself where you have ideas about how you should proceed in life that are contradictory, that you don't understand, that you have to delve into. That's what the images are all about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, but what I was thinking is that it seems that the way I understand it, that you want once the way I experience it, anyways. Like if I have the willingness to really do the work and do the discipline, it seems to me that that's what is required. And then the higher self will kind of pitch in and and help you to go. Once you have that kind of availability to really go forward, and then it's like, okay, now you took the first step, so now here I go and I will help you, rather than just like with a steel wheel forcing yourself to do certain things that totally do not feel harmonious with you. So it seems like even the effort itself needs to feel harmonious in order to be made. Not that it's not going to require the effort, but it seems like once you take that first step and have that willingness, then you'll be helped along the way. That's the way I see it.
That is a big paradox, because making an effort, right, from the spiritual will is not an effort. That is a paradox.
Right. Harmonious and beautiful. Yeah.
That's why it's so beautiful, important. The guide says that like the daily review, you have to ask yourself where you feel disharmony and distortion in your life. What do you experience that's painful? And think about, meditate on what that means. Because those points of disharmony and distortion are the keys to your misconceptions, the images. And once you're able to understand how they inform your will and how you make decisions, you're able to dissolve them. Also through grace, like what you always say, Mary, in the hand of God. Yeah, effort. It's a big paradox.
It is, no doubt.
Well, I feel that grace is so important, and I think that when we meditate together, I feel grace. Then sometimes you feel grace is everywhere. It's so funny because the ego is so limiting. But when you think about it from one point of view, it seems like everything is permeated by the ego. And then you think about it another way, and then there is no ego, and everything is grace. The unity appears, and the ego goes away. My friends, is there anyone else who'd like to say something? Drebra, would you like to say anything? I'm not putting you on the spot.
I wouldn't know where to start. You're super awesome. I just gotta say that, you're awesome. The way you explain things, it's so clear. Very few questions. I am so thankful for everybody sharing. Every single one of you who shared, I share something with you. I can relate. It speaks to my heart. I'm in a mess of confusion right now. Ever since I jumped in here, all body, cold water, the ego be tripping, and it's just beating. beating, and it manifests in the relationship with the two most important women in my life, my mother and my partner. And in every lecture that I picked up, everything is there. In this one, you know, the blaming, you know, the like, you know, I'm right, you know, you're wrong, and trying to understand all the disharmony occurring at the same time, almost all the time.
Yeah.
And you know, the COVID, you know, it makes kind of moving around a little harder. We're raising a child who's homeschooling, so that adds to all the craziness. And on in that also just really studying, you know, this lecture I had it on auto play as I drove around, as I walked around the house, because every time, even if I drift, there's some truth when I come back. And it just fills me with so much hope. I know that this madness is going to end. Everything is under control. I just gotta keep doing this. I'm so excited. I cannot tell you, everybody, how excited I am to be here. I'm so ready to go to work. This world is, part of my friends, it's a shithole right now. It's a mess, and it needs this to be out, to be broadcast. And I'm just so happy to be here, you know, doing the work, working the path. This is the one that's stuck. I am a fellow Unitarian, you know, Hudson Valley chapter. I love the Course in Miracles. I love spiritualism. I love Christianity. I love Buddhism. So everything is just coming here. It's almost like, you know, stepping, you know, like you said, Alan, standing in front of the door. I just gotta open it. And I'm just so excited to be here. And hopefully, you know, coming back more and more to the shindigs, because it's amazing. So I just want to thank you all. I'm so happy to find this community. I'm just really in awe of all the incredible experiences that I've, you know, heard tonight. So I'm thankful for all of you. Thank you so much for welcoming me.
And thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Yeah, the Pathwork has come a long way since we started in Phoenicia, New York, about 50 years ago, with Eva. Actually, longer ago than that, 65.
That's about, I'm sorry, that's about 40 minutes away from where I am.
Right, right. You're not far.
No, we almost bought a house there. It's beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, in the Woodland Valley. Now it's the Menla Center. You know, there are, in New York, we've kind of kept the flame burning, but in many other parts of the country and in the world, the Pathwork has big centers with more people. And, you know, in Pittsburgh, all of a sudden, there's like 12 Pathwork helpers there. And I'm going to put all of them on our website, because if you want to work with a Pathwork helper, that's a good way to do it. Like, reach out to somebody. There are some helpers here in New York, like Marion Lewis, of course. You've been a helper for decades. But, you know, working with a Pathwork helper is a way to get in deeper into the process. We used to have, you know, intimate, strong Pathwork groups where people would work on these issues very deeply in front of one another. And that was a beautiful thing that we had here in New York that we don't really do anymore. But in other parts of the country, they do that. And of course, the path is huge in Brazil. There are thousands of Pathworkers in Brazil, and many Pathwork teachers, and also Argentina, and Pathwork workers in Germany and Holland and Portugal, lots of places. So I'm going to put up those helpers. If anyone's interested in working with the Pathwork helper that is not doing that, that would be a nice thing to do. That would be a good thing to, whether, as the guide often says, whatever is most furthersome to you, what you feel your heart is called to do next. So my friends, if no one else has anything else they want to say, I thought I could read a couple of paragraphs and then we could meditate, have our 10-minute meditation. All right, I'm going to read 2 paragraphs from the lecture, page 6, and then we'll have our 10-minute meditation. Okay? As mentioned before, the ego must learn and adopt attitudes compatible with the universal divine ones. This is, as you know, not easy. The inspiration of the spiritual self is blocked off to the degree the ego is blindly involved in its negativity, including laziness, pride, self-will, fear, wish to cheat life, and escapist tendencies. But as these tendencies are honestly recognized and gradually given up, the influx of the world of eternal truth, love, and beauty becomes possible. People truly wither away when they remain in the narrow confines of their present state because they feel it is safe and they think they have eliminated the need for effort and investment. They do not permit life to regenerate them. Regeneration can happen only where inner movement exists. It always seems frightening at first to go beyond the ego's present confines. The new territory is foreign, unknown. People want to avoid the unknown, and they would rather cower in fear of it than have the courage to learn about it and make it their own. To make the unknown known, outside as well as inside, is the beauty of the spiritual path. All right, my friends, let's meditate for 10 minutes.